Well, I've decided to go ahead and repaint the trunk jambs. And I think I'll repaint the bottom of the trunk lid as well. You know, there's a little bit of rust on the hinge and some paint scraped. We got the primer underneath it. Got the same thing over here. So I'm just going to pull the trunk lid off and repaint the trunk jamb. And I think I'm going to repaint the inside of the trunk lid. Well, I drilled a 0.104 hole in the trunk mounting bracket, the hinge here, and then I cut a piece of wire to fit the hole. So when I removed the trunk lid and put it back on, I can easily align it. Alright, so the trunk lid's off, and now I'll start working on these areas, getting them sanded, and then I'll tape everything off and repaint the jambs. And then for the trunk lid, I'll do the same with the trunk lid. It's actually in pretty good shape, but I'm going to go ahead and scuff it up and paint it just to make sure the paint and the jambs and the trunk lid match. Well, we got the trunk jambs scuffed up as well as the hinges. I think tomorrow I'll wash everything down, and then I'll do a little more careful sanding around the edges. And if I need to put some primer on it, I will. But hopefully get it painted in a few days. Well, it's time to paint the trunk jambs. I think I have everything ready. Everything's been cleaned, taped off. Probably not the most ideal conditions. It's in the mid-50s. So it's a little bit cool, but give it a shot and see how it goes. All right, I got tape pulled off. And happily, I didn't get any bleed through under the tape. So, everything looks pretty good. I'm happy the way it blended into the fender. worked pretty well. The color's not an exact match. You know, I went to the automotive paint store, tried to have the color matched up, and they couldn't match it. And you know, they used the computer and they couldn't match it. So I just went through the paint book and found something that looked closest, and it's just a little off. The body paint is just a tinge purple, and so it's not a perfect match, but you know, it's better than having a scratched up jams in my trunk, so it'll have to do. It is a driver, it's not a show car, so you know, I do the best I can working out in my garage. All right, the deck lid's taped off. I'll flip it over, give it a final cleaning, and it'll be time to spray it. I have the bottom of the trunk lid painted. And I did end up using some 1500 grit sandpaper and some rubbing compound. There's a little bit of orange peel, and I decided I didn't want that, so took a little bit of time, color sanded it, and then rubbed it with rubbing compound, and I did that by hand. So I ended up with a pretty nice finish on the trunk lid. And in the jams, did the same thing with the trunk jams. Sanded those with 1500 grit and rub those out by hand. So now I've wiped down the trunk. I'm going to tape off the holes for the marker lights, and I've taped off the divider there for the interior. And I'm going to get ready to spray the spatter paint. This is what I'm going to use to shoot spatter paint in the trunk with. And it is black and aqua. I use this in the Rally 350 and it worked pretty well, so I'm expecting it to work well today. It's a little bit cool out. About 58 degrees in the garage, so I'm a little bit concerned with that. But we'll see how it goes, and if I have problems with it, then I'll stop. I got the trunk latch cleaned up. Soaked it in purple cleaner for a few days. It was oversprayed with paint a couple times. Not all of the paint came off, as you can see. I tried to feather it out a little bit with some 220 grit. So I'll give it a coat of paint and see how it looks. Now you can see with this trunk latch that before I removed the trunk latch, I drilled a couple holes for these alignment pins, so that when I put the latch back on, I just reinsert these pins, tighten it up, and then the latch is in exactly the place it was when I took it apart. And now that I got the latch tightened up, I just remove the pin. And the trunk latch is in the exact place it was before I removed it. Alright, ready to set the trunk lid in place. With a couple pieces of foam on each side. The foam's just inside the edge of the trunk line here, so the edge of the trunk will sit on the foam. And that allow me to rest the trunk lid on the foam while I position myself, since this is a one-man operation. Alignment pin in place. Alright, pull the pins out. And I should have perfect trunk alignment. And so that's a way to get effortless trunk alignment if your alignment's good before you remove a hood or a trunk lid. If you use that method of drilling the hole and inserting the pins, then you just get perfect alignment, and it's just that easy. And you need to do it by yourself. Of course, hoods are pretty heavy, so at my age I need somebody to help me with a hood. But I'm still strong enough to handle a trunk lid. Well, alright, I got the weather stripping glued in place, and I'll leave the tape on it overnight. And I got a little piece of tape across the seam there. And I reused the weather stripping that was on the car. I was able to get it off without damaging it. And I used this weather stripping adhesive to glue it in place. So I'll let that sit overnight like that, and then I'll pull the tape off. But it's starting to look like a trunk. Put in a new trunk lock. And of course I removed and cleaned the latch. It's all bolted in place. So, the last thing I have to do is clear coat the spatter paint. And I'll probably do that tomorrow. Alright, well I use this OER, Trunk Spatter Clear. And I bought 2 cans of this. And I ended up using about 1.5 cans. You can see it's still a little bit wet. And I got really good coverage. So, for a Firebird, 2 cans should be plenty. So I'll give this a few days to dry and then move on, put the wiring harness in and then work on the trunk divider up there. But it's cool, it's in the high 50s, and this stuff takes a while to dry. So I'm going to give it a couple days. I'm getting ready to install the rear marker lights. I got some new seals, some new gaskets. And there's 2 pairs, so there's a pair for the back and there's a pair for the front. And I cleaned up the lenses, cleaned them up as best I could without, going crazy on it. And so I'm going to go ahead and install them. I got the license plate door cleaned and painted. It's not my best work, but I soaked it in purple cleaner for 4 days. I took a wire brush to it, and I hit it in a few areas with 120 grit sandpaper, and I just sprayed it with flat black Rust-Oleum. And you can see I got a run there, a couple of runs there, but I just wanted to get it coated. And you're not going to see it, so just wanted to get it coated. It had been oversprayed with blue paint, and the spring had some rust on it, and it just looks a lot better now. So I'll get the plate on it. I'll be done with that. Alright, well I got the plate on. I got my nice little Pontiac plate frame. And I have the pull tab for the door, and if you own one of these Firebirds, you know what a pain it can be if you don't have one of these on there. How difficult it is to get the door open put gas in the car. So it's done, and just keep moving on to the next thing. All right, the trunk harness I think is ready to put together, ready to put back in the sheath. I used my multimeter and I did a continuity test on the harness. I couldn't get the little 9-volt battery trick to work, so just checked it for ohms and continuity. The convoluted tubing, I wanted to buy new tubing and no one sells it, so I took the old tubing and I just soaked it in a tub of purple cleaner for 4 days and then took a scrub brush to it, and it cleaned up pretty good. I mean, it's not new, but it was pretty grungy, and it had it was pretty messy, but it cleaned up decently, so I'm going to go ahead and reuse it. And I have got to replace 2 bulbs, otherwise the harness is cleaned up. I took lacquer thinner, cleaned all the sockets. Some of these, like these on side marker lamps, they were covered in like undercoating, and so they're not perfectly clean, but they're a lot cleaner than they were. And I suppose I could take a toothbrush or something to all these sockets, but I'm not going to do that. So I just cleaned them with a rag and dipped in lacquer thinner and cleaned them up, so they're better. Quite a bit better, actually. All right, so I'm going to put the harness back in the sheath and then get it ready to plug in. Well, I'm ready to put the harness in place, and I kind of have it tucked into the sheath, and I'll probably have to move some things around, but once I get everything hooked, I can position it for how it's finally going to rest, and then I'll tape up some of the spots and see how it fits. All right, well, I think I have the trunk done. I still have the trunk divider to put in. That's kind of a long story. I ended up having to buy an A-body trunk divider because to buy one for this car from Firebird Central, shipping was going to be $98 for a $15 part, and I just wasn't going to do that. So what I did is I bought an A-body trunk divider from Summit, and I had $100 worth of parts, and I got free shipping. So what I'll have to do is I'll have to cut it up to fit the Firebird. Well, the trunk mat's in, and hopefully it'll conform to the shape a little bit better over time. I almost like it better without it, but it's good to have it in there. I'm never going to put a spare in the car, but it looks more finished that way. And the wiring looks pretty good. I know there's so much light there you can't see, but I cleaned it up. I put in an effort to clean it up, and doesn't look too bad. So next will be the trunk divider. Once the trunk divider's in, I can put the back seat back in and just call the trunk done. Well, about a month ago, I looked into buying a trunk divider from Firebird Central, and the cost of the divider was reasonable, but they wanted $98 to ship it. And, that's just insane, so I'm not doing that. So what I did is I bought a GMA body trunk divider from Summit for $15, and then I just bought $85 worth of parts so I get free shipping. So that's what I got. I have an A-body trunk divider, and I'm going to cut it up and fill those gaps in the steel that divide the cabin from the trunk. So if you look at it from the trunk, it looked like it has the correct trunk divider. And you really won't know the difference unless you remove the back seat. So we'll see how that works out. Alright, I got some new bumpers for the trunk lid. And have the trunk divider in. So that's it. That finishes the trunk. We are officially done now. So the next thing is to put the back seat back in, and then I think I'll shampoo the interior carpet, and I think I might clean and repaint the bucket seat tracks. So we'll see. Keep moving forward.